Hello everybody and welcome to the first ever episode of the T.H.O. Movie Reviews Podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I am so excited and honored that you've decided to join me today for what I believe is going to be the first step of a great journey. For those of you who don't know me, I am a longtime film critic and a lifelong movie fan. I grew up watching everything from musicals to thrillers to silent movies to comic book movies, and I have a great passion for sharing my thoughts about film. I think that what film is, the fusion of music, of performance, of photography, to me, that combination is one of the most beautiful things on this planet. Now, since this is the first episode of the show, I wanted to give you a chance to get to know me a little better, and I think there's no better way to get to know a movie fan than by hearing them talk about their favorite movies. So I am going to tell you about my top 11 favorite films of all time. Yes, there are 11, 10 was not enough for me. And no, I'm not going to rank them. I'm not going to rank this list. It's going to be in alphabetical order. And I'm going to do it in a bit of a unique way. I'm not going to do too much analysis of each film as a whole, but I am going to tell you about one particular scene from each film on my list that I particularly love, and a scene that explains a bit of why I love the movie. Alright, so let's get started. The first film on my list is from a director who means a great deal to me, and it's Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises. There's so many moments in The Dark Knight Rises I could go into. You know, the final battle on the streets of Gotham, from the moment where Bruce Wayne climbs out of the prison pit. But there's just one simple moment I want to talk to you about. And it's the scene where Bruce Wayne is still in prison, and he's working out, he's doing push-ups, he's preparing for the moment when he escapes and returns to Gotham City to save the city from falling into chaos and war. And as he's doing push-ups, one of the other prisoners says, "Why build yourself?" Essentially he's asking, why bother? You know there's a good chance you're going to be defeated, why do you push yourself? And Bruce Wayne simply says, "I'm not meant to die in here." Think about that. I'm not meant to die in here. Those are just a few simple words, but they're more than that. They're a declaration of defiance, of belief that he's not meant to be broken. He's meant for something more. He's meant to still triumph, even though the adversity in this case is so immense. And to me, that moment, that declaration of "I'm not meant to die in here," that's one of the most powerful things I've ever seen in a movie. And it continues to inspire me to this day. Alright, so the next film on my list is a bit smaller, but no less emotional. It's Bernardo Bertolucci's The Dreamers, which is a beautiful, colorful, and sexy movie from 2003. And the scene I've chosen for today occurs partway through the film. Well, of course it occurs partway through the film. Every scene does. But what I should say is this scene occurs early in the film when Ava Green, her character, is dancing around an apartment. And she's wearing a pair of white overalls and sunglasses and dancing and singing at the same time. And to me, that moment symbolizes what this movie is about. It's about great, hilarious, lovable, eccentric, larger-than-life, passionate characters. It's about getting to know them and spending time with them, and that's what makes The Dreamers, even though it's a tragic and painful movie at times, those characters are what make it a joy to watch. Now, the next film on my list is a very different kind of work entirely, and it's The Empire Strikes Back. And really, with this one, there's only one scene I could talk about. I mean, come on. Luke, I am your father. That is not only the scene of the movie, it's the scene of the Star Wars saga. It's the scene of movies in the 80s, in a lot of ways, dare I say it. Although there were a lot of great films in the 80s, obviously. But for me, why that moment? That moment when Luke Skywalker, the ultimate hero, finds out that the ultimate evil in the galaxy is his father. To me, that moment is meaningful because it's the moment where the Star Wars saga opens up. The moment where the good versus evil narrative of the first film is subverted for all time. Because if someone as good as Luke can come from someone as horrific as Darth Vader, then the world is a much more complex place. Then good and evil are not so far apart as we might believe. And to me, that is in some way a more disturbing worldview because it hints that there is, there's great, negative emotion and brutality that slumbers in all of us. But at the same time, I also think that, Darth Vader declaring he is Luke's father, I think that opens up a more hopeful view of the universe. Because if good and evil are more closely aligned than we might think, then there's a bit of good in evil, and then maybe life isn't as hopeless as it can sometimes seem. Alright, now the next film on my list is in a similar vein. It's also a big blockbuster movie, and it's Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This to me is the best of the Harry Potter films, and it's the one film in the franchise that I think is actually better than the book. Although you could argue that the third film was better than the book as well. But let's not get into that right now. But the scene I've chosen to talk about occurs towards the beginning of the film, and it's where the characters are running up a hillside. It's very dark, the sun is just barely peeking out, it's early morning, and the camera moves through these grasses that are very long and tall and dark green, and for the most part still shrouded in the cloak of night, although you can see the sunlight starting to peek through. And to me, this is just a moment of pure wonder, absolute sheer wonder. And the hopefulness of Patrick Doyle's score only adds to that and only amps up that sense of awe. To me, it's a beautiful moment, an incredibly beautiful and poetic movie. Alright, continuing in the realm of British fantasy, the next film on my list is the 2005 adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now obviously, this film is a comedy, and to me it is indeed one of the funniest comedies ever made. But the scene I've chosen to talk about today is actually quite serious. It comes late in the movie, and we see the main characters of the film standing on their spaceship, the Heart of Gold. But here's the interesting part. The camera in this scene is outside the ship, and it's looking at them from a bit away, looking at them standing in front of the main window of the ship. And there's something to me incredibly beautiful and poignant and lonely about seeing these characters, standing there, but seeing them from outside the ship, so they look like these tiny, lonely specks. And really, that's what The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is all about. Even though it's an incredibly witty movie, in a lot of ways it's about loneliness, it's about isolation, it's about misfits, characters who have lost their home. And that to me is perfectly articulated in this one beautiful, beautiful moment, among many in the film. Alright, now the next film on my list is totally different. It's La Vie d'Adèle, Chapitre en deux. And if that title doesn't sound familiar, it's because that film is also known as Blue is the Warmest Color. But I don't like that title. I know that was the title of the graphic novel the movie was based on, but I don't think that title fits the movie. Because the original French title, which means The Story of Adele, chapters 1 and 2, I think is much more appropriate. Because that's what this movie is about. It's about this wonderful character named Adele, played by Adele Exarchopoulos. And the scene I've chosen to talk about is a scene of her simply lying in her bed, asleep. and we get two particularly interesting shots. We get a close-up of her face with her eyes shut and her teeth kind of exposed as she sleeps. And we get one wider shot of her sprawled out on the bed, her arms spread out, her legs twisted in an odd position. And the camera lingers in this moment, allowing us to, in a sense, experience it with her because the pace is so fantastically slow. And what's wondrous about that is that, we're not just moving from one scene to the next. We're being allowed to take a moment to stop and have a moment with this beautiful character and see her in kind of an unflattering moment where her body's all twisted in weird directions. But that's the beauty of it. The beauty that we're seeing a very ordinary human moment and being allowed to absorb it. And speaking of very ordinary human movies, the next film on my list is, in a lot of ways, very ordinary, but also absolutely extraordinary. And it's Lost in Translation, which is my favorite film of all time. I know, I said I wasn't going to rank these movies, but of all the movies on this list, Lost in Translation stands above them all. The scene from the movie that stands out to me is a scene where Scarlett Johansson is sitting on the windowsill of a hotel room in Tokyo. And the camera's moving kind of shakily around her, and there's this very sad electronic type music playing on the soundtrack. And it's a very lonely scene because she's all alone in the room and she's staring down at the city, which is so far below her. All the white skyscrapers look like tiny, tiny, tiny buildings way down there. And yet, to me, there's something hopeful about this moment because the music is sad, but it's also sweet. And as the camera circles around Scarlett Johansson, as it moves from her back to her feet next to the glass, I don't know. I mean, yes, it's a moment of isolation, but somehow the visual poetry, the sweetness of the music, makes it seem like a moment of hope. And Lost in Translation ultimately is a moment of hope, a moment of characters finding connection, finding something more in life than the average, than the everyday. And that's part of why I love it. Alright, the next film on my list is another comedy. It's from the 90s and it's called Metropolitan. This is an incredibly witty movie about a bunch of rich kids sitting around talking in New York, and it's a great satire of their pretentiousness, but it's also a very compassionate movie. It's a coming of age story. It's a story about people being ostracized from social circles, and it's about this monotony that the characters get caught up in said social circles. And that gets broken up in a beautiful scene late in the movie where two of the characters leave New York. They take a cab out of the city, and we see the great sweep of the freeway. We see the tall buildings of Manhattan being left behind. And it's a thrilling moment because these characters have been locked in this insular world the whole movie, this world of apartments and parties and crowded city sidewalks. And yet now we see them moving out into the open, moving out literally into the sun. And it's a great adventurous moment. There's a real openness and beauty and even momentousness to it. And it symbolizes in a lot of ways what this movie is about, which is about moving on. Alright, going back into the fantasy realm, the next film on my list is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. Definitely not Mark Webb's Spider-Man 2. No way. But that's another video. So, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. What can I say about this movie? It's beautiful. I have loved Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man ever since I saw the original Spider-Man film when I was homesick in 7th grade. To me, Tobey's Spider-Man is the best of all the actors to don those tights. He brought not only humor to the role, because all the actors have brought humor. He brought compassion. He brought humanity. He brought eccentricity. He gave you a character who was grief-stricken and yet capable of so much love. To me, he got it absolutely right. And the scene I want to talk about it comes midway through the movie. He's just found out that Mary Jane, the love of his life, is going to marry someone else. And he's all alone in an alleyway, and his superpowers are failing him. So he tries to climb up a wall without his mask, and he keeps falling. And we see his fingers trying to cling to the cracks in the wall as he falls. But he keeps on sliding back until finally he crashes down back into the alley, lands in a puddle, and bangs up against a dumpster. And to me, that moment is one of the most important in the movie, because this alleyway, we see him essentially surrounded by two walls, literally boxed off from the world. And that's what this movie is about, him being boxed off in the world and bringing us into his world and making us experience his isolation, the isolation of someone who has aspired to a higher calling, but that calling has set him off from the rest of the world. And yet, perversely, the great beauty of the movie is that it's about Spider-Man / Peter Parker realizing that maybe he does not need to be set off from the world. Maybe he can connect with people in a deeper way. Alright, we got only 2 more movies left on this list. One of them is another comic book movie, but before that, it is James Cameron's Titanic. I saw Titanic long after the late 90s media blitz, when the movie was raking in hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, and everyone was griping about it. I saw it long after the hype, and to me, I saw it at the beach, at a rental house, and after I watched it, I thought, how could anyone not like this? How could anyone not be inspired and moved by this grand, larger-than-life sweeping movie? And the first moment I thought that was the scene early on where Leonardo DiCaprio is standing on the edge of the Titanic, and he's looking down into the water and seeing the dolphins swimming just below the water and then leaping out. And to me, that moment is, again, pure wonder, pure screen poetry. It's a thing of beauty, and it's only enhanced by the awestruck choir in James Horner's marvelous, marvelous score. And the larger-than-life beauty of the moment is, for me, what Titanic is all about. It is a movie where size matters, where the sheer grandeur of it is designed to sweep you off your feet, to take control of you, to take you to a place of entrancement that you could not have imagined. And for me, that's why it continues to this day to be one of my favorite films of all time. Alright, we got one more movie left on this list. There's only so many letters left in the alphabet. One of them is X, and the last movie on my list of my top 11 favorite films of all time is Bryan Singer's X2. I don't know where to begin. I mean, this is a movie that has traumatized me, thrilled me, moved me, terrified me, caused me to become obsessed. It's one of the great movie experiences I've had in my lifetime. So how do you pick a scene from something like that? Well, you just pick one of the many great ones. And for me, one of the great ones is when Ian McKellen's character, Magneto, is escaping from prison. If you don't know the movies, if you haven't seen the X-Men movies, he has the power to control metal, and he's in a plastic prison. And he escapes by getting one of his henchwomen to smuggle, or, well, his only henchwoman, to smuggle a little bit of iron into the blood of one of the guards. And so what happens is he draws the blood out of the guard, and turns into this metal platform that he uses to float himself away from his cell. And there's this wonderful moment where Magneto uses his powers to expand this metal into a platform, and he holds it before his face and looks at himself in it. He sees his reflection in it. It's a mirror, and we see his old grizzled face. Then he puts it down, steps onto the platform, and floats out into the darkness that surrounds his prison cell. And there's something absolutely transfixing about seeing this old man floating through the darkness with his arms crossed. And he looks old. He doesn't look frail. In fact, there's a little smile on his face, a cruel smile, as he enjoys his power and relishes it. And even though the character is, in many ways, a monstrous figure, in that moment of freedom, in that moment where he is finally escaping his confinement, you feel his joy as well. Alright, that concludes my list of my top 11 films of all time. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back and leave some of your favorite films in the comment section below this video. I'd love to hear from any and all of you who are out there watching. Don't forget, if you liked this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, T.H.O Movie Reviews, and remember to check out the T.H.O Movie Reviews blog. You can find it at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com, and it's full of all kinds of great reviews and content. Also, don't forget to like us on Facebook, and please follow us on Twitter at THO Movie Reviews. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. Thank you so much for joining me today, and from all of us here at THO Movie Reviews, happy movie watching.